Welcome to Rising Stars, where Miriam Knight, publisher of New Consciousness Review, interviews exciting new voices in the world of progressive and transformational books, films, and ideas, who offer intriguing perspectives on life, the universe, and everything in between. Join us as we celebrate the conscious awakening and explore many expressions of consciousness in action.
Welcome everyone. I'm Miriam Knight, and I have a fascinating subject to talk about today with my very interesting guest, Shelly Malone. Shelly is a conventionally trained, progressive-minded nutritionist who has spent over 20 years working in the healthcare and nutrition industries. She's a registered dietitian nutritionist and a member of the Dietitians in Integrative and Functional Medicine practice group within the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. Try to say that twice. She holds a BS in Nutritional Science from Cal Polytech and has a master's in public health from UCLA. She has a concentration in nutrition. This has been the theme of her work. And particularly, she is certified in Bioindividual Nutrition. Now, she was inspired by her own diagnosis of rheumatoid arthritis, and she was able to manage her symptoms with diet and lifestyle for nearly a decade. As a result, she's on a mission to help others understand and reap the benefits of an anti-inflammatory lifestyle. She's pulled together her knowledge into her new book called Inflamed, Discover the Root Cause of Inflammation and Personalize a Step-by-Step Plan to Create a Healthy and Vibrant Life. Welcome, Shelly Malone.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, this is such an important topic because nowadays the subject of nutrition has really come up on everybody's radar, and people are starting to realize that the aches and pains that they experience are not their normal state. So I love your book because it's a really accessible, step-by-step how to understand your own possible causes of aches and pains caused by inflammation. I think people are really pretty much agreeing that inflammation is kind of at the root of all of this. So I want to jump in and explore this book with you so we can illuminate a little bit more our listeners. So let's start with inflammation. What are some of the ways that it manifests in the body?
Oh, some of the ways it manifests. Well, it's really at the root cause of just about any chronic condition, unless it's an infectious condition. But any type of chronic disease, which we sometimes call lifestyle disease, because it's really at the core of managing it and preventing it, is diet and lifestyle. So anything from all of your autoimmune conditions, rheumatoid arthritis, MS. Hashimoto's thyroiditis, your digestive issues, cardiovascular issues, diabetes, even, aches and pains we talked about, even if you're not to the point where you've gotten a certain diagnosis, but you're having some type of chronic symptom of joint pain or skin issues, it's really widespread how it can manifest. Mm-hmm.
And what are some of the causes behind it?
Well, the causes of inflammation, primarily it's diet and lifestyle. So there's, we kind of have to control kind of three different aspects. We want to, control our hormones, because certain hormones can be inflammatory, like insulin. So a diet high in sugar is going to raise your glucose, and in response, your insulin has to raise, and that can be inflammatory. Stress is a big one, and then you have kind of a dysregulated cortisol, which can become inflammatory. We also have so many products in our environment that we now know as endocrine disruptors, so they're disrupting our hormones. Parabens and phthalates and different things we're getting in our personal care products and pesticides in our foods are all disrupting our hormones, which can also affect our gut health, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit more. But that's another big piece of it, is just making sure that you have a healthy gut microbiome. And, there's a lot of talk about leaky gut now, but that's where the biggest concentration of our immune cells are. So that's key. Food sensitivities are a big one. If you're eating a food that you're sensitive to, you're kind of constantly triggering this inflammation within your body. And then just not eating a whole healthful diet. Nutrient deficiencies play a huge role in inflammation and all of the conditions that come out of that.
What about genetics?
There's a lot to it. Genetics also plays a role. Genetics is interesting. It plays a role and it doesn't play a role. So in the sense that, you're predisposed to a certain condition, we now know that most chronic issues, only 10 to 20% of those come about because of genetics. It's really your environment, your diet and lifestyle that determine if you're going to turn on those genes. So, of course, if you are predisposed, like myself, I have a family history of rheumatoid arthritis, so I was predisposed to get that condition. But it was my diet and my lifestyle that kind of opened the doors for that to come through and turn those genes on. So they play a role in that way. Another topic we're learning more about is some kind of genetic variation, SNPs. There's a lot of talk about kind of the MTHFR and different genetic mutations that might affect your ability to process and use certain nutrients like B vitamins. And if you do have one of those variations, you might need to get some type of special supplementation to make sure you can actually absorb those nutrients. So it definitely plays a role, but I think in terms of thinking it like, well, I'm destined to get this disease because my mother had it, my grandmother had it, we need to get out of that mindset and know that we have more control than we think if we can, clean up our diet and lifestyle.
That's good news. Now, one of the first things that you mentioned was the role of insulin and obviously the impact of sugar in our diets. One of the things that I noticed, I don't remember whether it was in your book or just read it, that type 2 diabetes, which used to be considered adult onset diabetes, kind of into your midlife, is now occurring in young people. And what do you think, I know I'm offering you a leading question, but what is the role of diet in causing these changes, causing the earlier appearance of diabetes in youngsters?
Well, diet is huge. It is unfortunate, and I think obviously sugar plays a role because it is, as I mentioned, when you eat sugar, it's especially a processed sugar, it spikes your glucose, and then your insulin has to respond. And over time, your insulin just isn't as responsive. You're not as sensitive to it, so you need to have more and more of it circulating through your body. But it's the sugar is a big part. Just overeating is a big part of it because of the weight gain can lead to diabetes. And we're learning more and more about the microbiome and the different kind of microbes that are in your gut, and there's certain ones that if your gut microbiome is not balanced as it should, it can lead to conditions like diabetes. So sugar also plays a role. It feeds, whenever we think of our gut microbiome, we always want to make sure we have good bacteria, more good bacteria to bad, right? And so when you eat sugar, it feeds the bad bacteria like yeast. So it can throw that off a condition kind of known as dysbiosis, and if it gets bad enough, then it can lead to a leaky gut. So there's a lot of different issues related to diabetes, and it's just unfortunate. I think even people well-meaning, our food supply, we have GMOs that can damage the gut as well. It's really hard to avoid it unless you're very intentional about what you eat. And so if you're not as familiar with seeking out those foods, it's really tough. And actually that's really heartbreaking for me, because sometimes I think people, even really well-meaning, aren't realizing the added sugar that they're getting from packaged foods or the GMOs and what that is doing to their system.
Yeah, just a word about GMOs. Obviously, the manipulation of the genes has been to make them either kill bugs, sort of an internal pesticide, and be resistant to other pesticides. So that particular characteristic not only kills the pests on the wheat or the soybeans or the corn, but also in your gut, causing all the problems that we were just discussing. So we will be back after the break. We're speaking with Shelly Malone about her book, Inflamed. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Your conscious lifestyle on steroids. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Humanity Healing International is a small nonprofit with a big dream. Since 2007, HHI has been working tirelessly to bring help to communities with little or no hope. Our projects are not broad mandates, nor are they overnight solutions, but they bring the reassurance that no one is alone and that someone cares. To learn more, please visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Hi everyone, this is Shay Parker, the host of Best of the Best, which airs live right here on IOM Radio every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific. I'm super excited to bring you expert guest hosts, spiritual discussions, free psychic readings, and so much more. I can promise that you will not want to miss this one-of-a-kind, fun, yet touching, down-to-earth show. Join us every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Pacific on OTR-FM. This is Shay Parker, and I can't wait to see you there.
I'm Fidel Mshombo. I was born in a city called the Bukavu in the Congo. We were a loving family, and then, boom, everything that I had disappeared in a single day. People think that when you are a refugee, and they resettle you to America, and all your problems are done. They don't understand that that's the beginning of everything. I was not born a refugee. I was made one.
It's time we welcome refugee families with open arms. Learn more at embracerefugees.org, brought to you by the Ad Council.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Shelly Malone about the subject of inflammation. So, Shelly, we were talking about the gut and the importance of the gut and the microbiome. I also read that there has been an increase in gut problems because of the increase in cesarean births, because the babies don't go through the birth canal and they don't get inoculated with the bugs of the mother.
Yes.
So what do you do about that?
Well, interesting. They're now, I mean, it's not standard, but there's definitely some more progressive facilities that are starting to swab the baby's mouth with kind of a sample of that of the microbes that they would have gotten from the mother, and that's showing some positive results. So that's really interesting. I think it might be some time before we see that standard of care. I think our hospitals are still a long way from kind of optimal practices for, even breastfeeding and encouraging breastfeeding and things like that. But that definitely shows promise. There's a whole other backstory that's definitely not my forte to get into about why there are so many C-sections. But I think that shows promise because it's not always within your control, and of course that's needed sometimes. And then I think obviously it's critical to breastfeed or get your baby milk, however that needs to happen. If you're, have a premature infant, if you can use a breast pump and at least get them that human milk, because the human milk is so critical in kind of closing up those tight junctions. Essentially, a baby's kind of born with a leaky gut, so especially the colostrum that you get in those first few days seals up those tight junctions of the gut. So breastfeeding, there's probiotics you can provide to infants in powder form. So there's definitely things you can do to combat it. So it's it's not the end. You don't need to completely, it's not a complete tragedy if that happens, but you need to stay on top of it and just be aware that that baby might be predisposed to issues.
So you mentioned leaky gut. How prevalent is that situation? And what is it?
Well, it's hard to say the prevalence, as I don't know that there's a lot of studies on leaky gut across the generalized population, because to do that we would need all the people educated to know that that's a root cause and getting to their practitioners and getting it tested. And I don't know that it's always commonly tested. You can do kind of a mannitol test to see if you truly have a leaky gut. I think a lot of times it's diagnosed clinically, just symptoms. There is some research that shows everyone who has an autoimmune disease that has been tested has been shown to have a leaky gut. So pretty well accepted that if you have an autoimmune condition, that you have leaky gut, and other things like digestive issues or skin issues, you can pretty much bet there's a leaky gut involved there. But
That's
overall prevalence of the population, I don't have that statistic.
Well, I was going to ask you what your gut feel is, but...
Oh, gosh. Oh,
I can't
that's
resist
a good one. That's a good one. But yeah, I think it's
so
probably pretty common.
Just describe the mechanism and what happens when you have a leaky gut. What is happening in your body?
Okay, so leaky gut is basically, I know that I kind of just can't stand that term. It's just such a, that's not an unattractive picture that you get in your head. Think of leaking in guts. But if you can think of your digestive system is supposed to be woven very tightly like a piece of cheesecloth, because your digestive system is charged with making sure that pathogens and other substances that will be seen as foreign to your system don't pass through that digestive system and then get into your bloodstream. And it provides the digestive enzymes so that you completely break down your food and they can't get through. But what can happen from diet, a high-sugar diet, gluten, GMOs, pesticides, other environmental factors that we're getting, it can start to become more permeable. And in my book, I say your cheesecloth has now become more like a tennis net, which is an exaggeration, but I think it gives a good visual of what's happening. So now these, what should be very tightly woven digestive lining gets more permeable and kind of holes in it, if you will, and you're eating a food, say you have like gluten or casein from milk that are really big molecules and hard to break down, you don't have the digestive juices to fully break them down. And then it's more permeable, so they kind of sneak out early into your system, and they're not supposed to be there. So to your body, it seems as something that's foreign, and it should attack, and then that's what elicits the inflammation. So that's essentially what leaky gut is.
So really the inflammation is just the body doing its best to repel invaders.
Yeah, and I always like to make the differentiation between acute and chronic inflammation. And it's really chronic inflammation that we're concerned about. Acute inflammation, if you spike a fever because you have an infection, or your ankle swells and bruises because you sprained it, it's healing. We need that. It's very essential, and we want that. The problem is that, when we're eating foods that we're sensitive to, or, our diet's not right, or we have these constant stressors in our life, your body's just constantly in this state of inflammation, and all the inflammatory hormones and all the physiological processes that are very good for an acute inflammatory condition are very unhealthy for a chronic condition. You don't want that inflammation constantly trickling through your body. So I think that's a good differentiation to make.
Right. Now, we are becoming more and more aware of gluten sensitivity, and even restaurants are starting to offer gluten-free menus. What do you think has caused this rise in gluten sensitivity, and what are its effects in the body?
Oh, well, the rise of gluten sensitivity, and there's a couple of different aspects. There's the actual just awareness of it, which I think that comes from when we have more research. We've actually had a lot of research on it for a long time, but it hasn't been in the mainstream. And so people seeking out more progressive practitioners that kind of acknowledge its role, I think that is part of why we're becoming more aware of it. And the food companies kind of jumping on the bandwagon, even if it's not really a healthful food, they are making gluten-free options, so everybody is aware of this gluten-free kind of label and issue. I think true celiac disease got more attention, which it should have, it's a different condition, but has at least raised the awareness. But the gluten itself it's just different. It's a different type of gluten, and it's more powerful, and we have different processed and very condensed versions of it because of the way we make bread. It's not grandma making bread on the counter, allowing the yeast to rise, and yeast actually eats up some of the gluten in the process of traditional bread making. When, now it's this quick rising bread that the gluten doesn't get eaten up. So we have more gluten in our bread products, just the way our diet has transitioned. And, that food guide pyramid came out, and, everything should be grains, at the base of the food guide pyramid. People are just eating so much of it. The base of so many people's diets are grains, so we're just eating so much of it. And then I think the other environmental factors, the added sugars in our food, which are compromising our gut integrity, possibly even leaky gut, makes you more prone to being sensitive to gluten. Because we have even more research now showing that consuming gluten unzips the tight junctions of your gut. Tight junctions are kind of what are keeping that from being permeable, and it releases a protein called zonulin, which does unzip those tight junctions. So there's a lot of different reasons for it.
So does that happen even if you don't have celiac disease?
Yes, this is outside of celiac disease. So you might hear of, non-celiac gluten sensitivity. That is a condition in itself, and we don't have firm numbers on prevalence of that either. I mean, I've seen numbers like for every person with celiac disease, there's probably 6 times more people that have a non-celiac gluten sensitivity. So it is very common, and is a very serious condition. Celiac disease is very serious as well. I don't think we should be comparing them and discounting what a gluten sensitivity is outside of celiac disease. But it is, and if you have a confirmed sensitivity, you really need to avoid it completely, because if you continue to eat it even a little bit, I hear a lot of people like, oh, I'm gluten light, and that's probably good as long as you confirm you don't have a sensitivity. You have to keep it out of your diet completely, because otherwise you're just constantly triggering that inflammation, and you never really give your body a chance to heal.
I read about a nun who had celiac and had a really rigorous diet, and she wasn't getting any better. And then when her doctor got to the bottom of it, it turned out she was eating 1 communion wafer a week, and that was enough to keep her inflamed.
Yeah, they say, especially with celiac disease, I mean, it's like the size of your pinky nail. Even consuming that much can cause a lot of damage. So, yeah. And
there are all kinds of hidden sources of gluten in everything from food additives to spices to things you absolutely wouldn't dream of. So that it's really a challenge for people.
It is everywhere. I know, like MSG, it can be in that. Anything malted could possibly have gluten. your soy sauce has gluten in it. They make a tamari version that is wheat-free, but, like, why does wheat need to be in soy sauce? I've heard wasabi might have it, which I know it's too hot for me. I don't eat, but that's something I've heard lately, too. Yeah, it's everywhere. You really have to be diligent to look out for it.
So what is the difference between a food sensitivity and a food allergy?
That's a good question. I think that's an important one because I see those terms kind of intermix sometimes. So a food allergy is like an IgE response. That's where you have an immediate response to be very serious, anaphylactic, respiratory issues, could even lead to death. That's a very, very serious issue, and that is very common. You see peanuts in kids and shellfish, strawberries. Those are common food allergens. A food sensitivity is sometimes called, a delayed hypersensitivity because it's not an immediate reaction like the food allergy. It can take days for it to show up, and that's one of the reasons it can be confusing for people to figure out if they have one. And typically not as severe. It's not life-threatening like an allergy.
It's not life-threatening.
Right.
Well, we'll
anyway.
We'll delve more deeply into this in the next part. We're speaking with Shelly Malone about her book, Inflamed. We'll be right back.
Free your mind with OMTimes Radio, IOM FM.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free, ascendinghearts.com.
Grab a cup of tea or a glass of wine and tune in for Inspired Conversations with publisher Linda Joy on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. Linda creates sacred space for leading female luminaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. A soulful venue where guests openly share the fears and obstacles they've overcome, wisdom and lessons learned, and the personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired Conversations to empower you on your path to authentic, soulful living.
There is no death, only a change of worlds. Chief Seattle. Deborah Livingston is an award-winning intuitive psychic medium whose international services include mediumship, spiritual assessment, animal communication, and spiritual mentoring. She is a published author and a trained shaman. Deborah provides evidential messages from spirit and departed loved ones. Learn more at deblivemedium.com. That's DEBLIV medium.com.
Sparky the Fire Dog here. Make sure your family has a fire escape plan, and they practice it twice a year. One important thing to practice is get low and go. If you see or smell smoke, it's important to get low and go. Protect your family from fire. For more information, visit sparky.org.
We want to keep you, your family, and your community safer from fire. This message brought to you by the National Fire Protection Association and your local fire department. Visit sparky.org.
Welcome back. So, Shelly, do you have a website that people could get more information from?
I do. Yeah, you can go to shellymalone.com. It's SHELLY. And for the book is inflamedbook.com. It gives more information about the book. But yeah, on my website I have a blog that I write about these type of topics, and I do videos occasionally as well, and share some different articles that I've been a part of.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned earlier some of the different conditions, the different chronic conditions that are associated with inflammation. And you talk a lot about combating this inflammation. inflammation. So one of the approaches is diet. Why should people be concerned about using the anti-inflammatory drugs that are so prevalent in the market?
Well, one, I mean, my biggest issue is, and I'm not saying there's never a situation where you wouldn't need these medications. I don't think people should suffer, and there could be a time and a place for them. But I think we can't rely on them solely because they don't get to the root cause of the issue. When you're using a anti-inflammatory medication to put out inflammation, it's kind of like trick candles on a birthday cake. You might put out that immediate symptom that you're having, but you're not getting to the root cause. So the symptom's going to come back. It might come back worse. You might need more medication, or it might manifest some different way because you never got to the root cause. Maybe you patch that one up, but another one's going to sneak out because that root cause is still there. And then with a lot of the anti-inflammatory medications that we have, they really damage our gut and our gut lining. So not only are they not getting to the root cause, but they're contributing to the root cause, which is a leaky gut. So I think I think that you need to definitely look at diet and lifestyle regardless. If you are in a situation where you need to be taking those, you have to start to address the diet and lifestyle as well. But definitely if you don't, I mean, I know a lot of people who are constantly popping, just over-the-counter, anti-inflammatory medications for any tiniest little thing. It's like, well, if it's a headache, let's look at the root cause. Like, are you sensitive to a food? Are you drinking enough water? If you have aches and pains, there's so many other things you could do to go about it. And I think we're just so used to these quick fix kind of Band-Aids that we just pop them in. And then in the case of an autoimmune disease where you've gone to the point of using an immunosuppressant, not that you would never need these, but they do, just as they say, they're suppressing your immune system. So it's kind of coming at it at this other side. You're trying to suppress your immune system so that it stops reacting to the inflammation. But there's another way to go about it, just if you could stop starting that fire of inflammation, by addressing diet and lifestyle, then you...
Now, there are some really common foods and that we ingest that cause inflammation. Perhaps you could review them for us.
Sure. Well, sugar's a big one. But as far as true food sensitivities, gluten, as we've talked about, casein, particularly the casein from cow's milk, which is a different type of casein, a more inflammatory casein than what you might get from sheep's or goat milk. Soy is a big one. Corn is another big one that is everywhere. Those are main ones. Sometimes some people might have issues with eggs and yeast, and there's some other common ones, but the big four, and what I always start my clients out with who are having issues, are gluten, casein, soy, and corn.
Now, you say casein instead of dairy products. Are there some dairy products that aren't so bad?
Well, I say casein because when you come to a food sensitivity, it's the protein in the food that you have a sensitivity to, right? So the gluten is the protein in your wheat and rye and barley and spelt. Casein is the protein in the dairy products. The fat in the dairy products shouldn't cause inflammation unless you're having some other issue or you have a gallbladder issue. You need to look at fat. But so if you were to have something like ghee, which is a clarified butter, which is, that just means they've clarified it so there is absolutely no casein, no protein in it, whereas butter might have a little bit, and some people might be able to tolerate butter. So that's why I say casein, because it's the protein. And then the other protein in milk, whey, some people can tolerate that who can't tolerate casein. So it's interesting. So in particular, it's your cow's milk, and especially pasteurized cow's milk. Dairy is really kind of on a spectrum. as far as sensitivity, whereas gluten is a little bit more absolute. Some people might be able to tolerate a raw version, like a raw cow's milk, because it's raw as it pasteurized. It still has the enzymes in it that's helping you break it down, because it's that undigested piece of it is what triggers the inflammation. So raw.
There are some milk products
or fermented.
Right.
Yeah, like a fermented, a kefir. Some people can tolerate that for the same reason, because that fermentation is helping the digestive process for it. But for anyone who's really looking to see if they have the sensitivity, I say at least 2 weeks, no casein whatsoever. And then maybe over time you could try to add like a raw goat's milk, because you have the enzyme, and the goat's milk is a different type of casein. So dairy or casein is more on a spectrum.
Mm-hmm. Now, they have these lactose-free milks, and there are a lot of people who are lactose intolerant. Do you think they might actually be casein intolerant?
Yeah, they could. I mean, that's a differentiation, and I bring that up in my book as well, because I think that's other piece of confusion. So, and that's another reason I talk in casein, and I kind of break this down in my book of what it all really means. I think there's a lot of people are familiar with these terms. They don't really understand and able to connect the dots, and I really believe that when you really understand the physiology, you're a little bit more motivated to make changes. But, yeah, the lactose. So lactose is the carbohydrate, right? So every food is made of 3 macronutrients: your fat, your protein, and carbohydrate. So a lactose intolerance means you don't have enough lactase, the enzyme that breaks down the carbohydrate lactose in milk. And then casein, and that's not necessarily going to be an inflammatory response. That's probably going to be some more of kind of like digestive response. You're not breaking it down. But it could be, it could be. I would say the casein sensitivity is more of a serious issue. I mean, all of us, as we age, we lose some lactase, that enzyme that breaks it down. So it could be a little bit of both. But I would be more concerned about a casein sensitivity.
Now, you talk a lot about how people, once they clean up their diet, they can try adding certain foods back in. So it's like the body calms down, and then it's not so reactive. What are some of the other things that can make the body reactive? You make a big point of stress, for example.
Yeah, so as far as adding foods back in, I mean, one, I don't think gluten is going to be on that list. If you have a sensitivity to gluten, you shouldn't be eating that ever. That's going to be a tough one. But if you can heal your leaky gut, first you have to get rid of all these foods that are causing the inflammation, including inflaming your gut. And there are supplements you can take to kind of heal that up. And then, you might be able to add in certain foods that you were sensitive to before. I know sometimes people will get an actual blood test to check their food sensitivities, and they'll come back with everything from like pepper to bananas. I mean, they're just sensitive to everything. But really what that means is a leaky gut, everything's getting through. So when you can seal that up, you don't usually have that issue. Just to clarify on that one, but and then your other question was what? Oh, the stress question. Sorry, I got so excited about the food sensitivities there. Yeah, the stress. So that stress is a huge piece of it. I mean, I always say, like, if you don't deal with the stress, healing is very hard to achieve, and I think we're all so cavalier about that. Everybody knows we should reduce stress, but I don't know that we're all making a priority, because it's really a physiological response, and namely cortisol is this hormone that gets dysregulated, and it's very key to affects your gut health. So it goes back to this root cause. Everything is interconnected, and so if you're not reducing the stress, you're just going to kind of keep circling, and you really have to try to lower that cortisol, because the cortisol just puts such a stress on your body and taps your adrenal glands, and it's all very interrelated. And I think what people don't realize is this kind of hidden, this like, it doesn't mean, oh, I'm stressed, I have a test tomorrow, I have to go speak, like these kind of acute instances. It's this chronic stress, like maybe you have financial burden, or you're a caretaker for someone. It's this, those are the type of stressors you really need to, that are really going to cause the issues. When you're just kind of always in the state of anxiety, that's when it really starts to, you start to pay a price in your health.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned, there's our break. You mentioned the relationship between sugar and cortisol, and the adrenal connection. It's all very fascinating, and we're going to wrap it up after the break. We're speaking with Shelly Malone about her book, Inflamed. We'll be right back.
Bringing you the best of the conscious minds in the world. OMTimes Radio, your conscious lifestyle on steroids. Being a radio host on IOM-FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network.
Join me, Maggie Chula, on Mondays at noon Eastern for Mastermind with Maggie. Let's work together in a mastermind. We can resolve life's problems and create goals for the future. Build action steps empowering you to create your life in partnership with your divine source of light, your soul. Manifesting your goals can be simple and easy, so come with your problems and leave with a plan. The Akashic Master Teachers and I are waiting to help you.
Today, my new dad threw a barbecue.
I burnt everything.
And then we played catch.
I broke Mr. Lewis's window. And then, somehow, my hand. My hand!
And then my dad even let me drive his car.
The hospital's on the right! It was a rough day.
It was a great day.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of kids in foster care will take you just as you are. For more information on how you can adopt, visit adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
And we're back with Shelly Malone. Shelly, in this last segment, I would love for you to give some tips to our listeners. I always believe in the 80-20 rule, so there must be, something at the 20% level that we can change in our lives that will have the biggest impact. What would you say would be the highest priority changes?
There's a lot. I would say, one, just starting to eat more whole foods, avoiding packaged foods. That kind of will address a lot of different issues. They're filled with added sugars. A lot of times they have GMOs. They could have pesticides. Another big issue with packaged foods that I have is usually if you look at the type of fats that they have, there'll be a very processed fat, which is very, the processed vegetable oils and some of the industrial seed oils are very inflammatory, and a big issue of inflammation is having an imbalance of omega-3 fats, which we get from fish and flax and kind of things people may not eat as commonly, and the omega-6, the kind of bad omega-6 fats, which are the processed vegetable oils. So when we're eating packaged foods, I think we're just getting an overabundance of these harmful oils. So if you can just stop doing that, you kind of check.
So which are the good oils?
The good oils are, fish oil is a good is a good one. Avocado oil, olive oil is a good one. Coconut oil, and if you're eating animal fats, they can actually be anti-inflammatory as well, which I think a lot of people are surprised to hear. If you're eating them from, pastured, grass-fed animals, they can be a good source of fats. I would avoid like canola oil and soy oil and corn and peanut and So I would say swapping out your fats is another one that I think is kind of an easy thing to do if you're cooking. I mean, it doesn't really, some people, the spectrum of where people are on their diets, and they have some really big non-starters, or their diets are just not near optimal. But if you're cooking, if you can just switch the fats you use, that's a pretty easy one to do, I think. It's just swapping. And I'm a big fan of that. I have one of my, in the toolkit in the back is just pantry staples to swap out. I'm a big fan of swapping things and not feeling like you have to completely turn over the apple cart to start eating.
Right, not
diet.
feeling deprived.
That's what I did.
Right.
It was a little shocking depending on where you are with your diet. So I think that's a good one. And simple things like cleaning up your water. You're getting reverse osmosis water. We're getting, think you're drinking 8 glasses of water a day, and if you're not drinking clean water, you're getting exposed to a lot of different chemicals, heavy metals, and pesticides, even some discarded medications. So reverse osmosis right now is the best method to do, which you can get a filter or you can buy filtered water. And salt, I think like easy things you can do, like avoid table salt, start using sea salt. It's going to have more minerals in it. It's not going to have as many synthetic ingredients in it and the bleach. So it's kind of these like foundational issues I think you can do. And then I would definitely, if you are having chronic issues, digestive issues, skin issues, absolutely if you have any type of autoimmune condition, I would at least take out gluten. I would try gluten and casein for a period of at least 2 weeks, ideally 4, and see how you feel.
What
that
about
might
turmeric?
be more of an advanced move. Turmeric is a great spice, or curcumin, the active ingredient in it. You can take that orally, or you can just use it in your foods. Look on Pinterest. You can make a turmeric latte. You can add it to soups. It's a really powerful anti-inflammatory and has been shown to be as effective as some of the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory medications, but without damaging your gut. So that's a good anti-inflammatory. And I really like cod liver oil supplements. High vitamin cod liver oil. You're getting high vitamin A and vitamin D, as well as the anti-inflammatory omega-3 fats. I would caution if you're on any blood thinning medication, and I always recommend, if you can, to get your nutrients tested, especially vitamin D, before you start taking supplementation. But I'm a big fan of cod liver oil.
Doesn't that have a problem with mercury?
Well, you need to get it from a good source, and there's some good companies that are getting sourcing their fish without ensuring them without heavy metals. Yeah, but you can use algal oil if you are not wanting to do the fish. Algae oil is another source of omega-3. Yeah, so those are some big ones. Just cleaning it up. Just a whole food. I also think if you can just start to kind of shift how you balance your meals. I think again, kind of back to that food guide pyramid where it's something we know, like how much are we supposed to eat of what? And I just, as a general rule, you should try to make each meal like 50% fruits and vegetables, mostly vegetables, and your meat from pastured, grass-fed organic sources should be a side. It's like a side dish, as well as your grains. I think we eat, certain people, I think, probably need to avoid grains, but I think everyone could reduce the amount of them. We just don't need to make those the mainstay of our plate. And what I see most commonly is either people build their meal around the meat or they build it around the grain. And we should be building it around the antioxidants and the vegetables and the fruit.
Well, that's very, very good advice. I noticed on your tool tips or something, you had something called golden milk, a reference to golden milk. What's that?
Oh, that was in an article I think I wrote for another website. That is turmeric. It's referring to turmeric, and it's kind of called in golden milk just because it has been shown to be such a powerful anti-inflammatory. But there's lots of different recipes to include turmeric, and you can take.
So, what would be the recipe for golden milk? Obviously, you're suggesting that we don't.
I didn't
milk.
write the recipe. I wrote the article on why turmeric is effective and why.
Okay, well, I will give the recipe because I wrote it down. It's 1 cup of almond milk, a half a teaspoon of turmeric, a half a teaspoon of ginger, 1/4 of a teaspoon of black pepper, and 1 teaspoon of coconut oil, and then sweeten to taste with whatever your particular preference is. Obviously, we're not recommending sugar. So I thought, I've actually tried that, and it's not at all bad. It's really pretty good.
Yeah, I've had some other, I couldn't recite a recipe off the top of my head, but I've seen some good recipes for like a turmeric latte, probably a similar recipe to that. And
they do say that combining black pepper with turmeric enhances the absorption of the turmeric.
Oh, interesting. I actually wasn't aware of that, so thank you.
Well, now you...
And I'm not sure. Honestly, now I need to find out where I'm associated with this recipe, but just the nature, I think, of promoting a book, your name pops up in different areas.
Yeah.
But I'll have to look that up. That does actually sounds good.
So, what are you doing next, Shelly?
Oh gosh.
Do you have another book in the works?
It's not in the works. It is in my head. I'm in the. I'm just kind of letting all the ideas flow in and taking lots of notes. I'm still in recovery from getting this one out. I think, it is like having a child. I need enough time to pass for me to forget how traumatizing the delivery was, and then that selective memory needs to kick in and to inspire. But I do have another idea in the works, a concept that builds on this, but it may be more specific to certain conditions, maybe a little more focus on autoimmunity and some other factors, and I might build that into a course as well. But I haven't formally started writing the book yet. I need my cortisol will go through the roof if I start that one.
Yeah, well, we were talking about the relationship between cortisol and all the other ills that befall us. So it's really important to keep our stress levels, clean up our diet. Considering how tough we are, we're awfully prone to breakage and going out of order.
Yeah, that's true. Well, we have some factors working against us these days. I feel like you really have to be kind of rogue and, just the society we live in, like the infrastructure and the food we have easy access to at restaurants and, the environmental factors.
And you
really
did mention...
make it easy.
Yeah, you mentioned in your book about the different things in our home environments that can be upsetting us too. So I really commend you on this very accessible and helpful book. It's all full of great tips for cleaning up your act and cleaning up your gut and getting everything tickety-boo, as they say in England.
Well, thank you. That was my point. I wanted to be very concise so people weren't overwhelmed, and I wanted it to be actionable so people really had very specific steps on to know, what do I do with all this information. So thank you very much.
Well done. So we were speaking to Shelly Malone about her book, Inflamed. It's in the bookstores, on Amazon. Highly recommended. Thank you very much, Shelly.
Thank you.
And do join us next week for our show. In the meantime, you can visit happyguide.com, HAPIGUIDE. And I hope you have a wonderful week. Many blessings. Goodbye.